After discovering my wife's infidelity, everything I once knew was shattered, but fate had something different in store for me. I found myself reborn back in high school, in this new life, one where I vowed never to repeat my past mistakes. This is more than just a story of betrayal. It's about transformation, self-discovery, and the sea courage to make the right choices for your future. If you've ever experienced betrayal, or feel like you're stuck in the wrong situation, this video may be the turning point you need to begin your own journey of rebirth. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of self-empowerment, life changes, and lessons learned. From the hardest of experiences. I am an orphan raised by the Li family. The elders of the Li family asked me to marry into the family, making Victoria my wife, and any children we had would carry the Li surname. I was deeply in love with Victoria, and given the kindness and care her parents showed me, I agreed without hesitation and married her. However, despite our marriage, Victoria did not become pregnant for a long time. My mother-in-law was furious. She forbade me from drinking alcohol or eating meat, and even prohibited me from staying up late to play video games. Despite all this, her wishes were not fulfilled. Frustrated, she made me drink goji berry tea and eat gins, sing, and even forced me to bow to Buddha daily. What she didn't know was that Victoria had never let me touch her in all our years of marriage. Later, I lay exhausted and ill in a hospital bed. Victoria, my wife, never came to see me for the last time. Instead, it was Ethan who kindly informed me that he and Victoria were planning their wedding and had no time to see me. It was then I realized Victoria had another life outside, while I was all alone. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the Li family home. Victoria's mother was joking, asking if I liked their daughter. I replied that I didn't anymore. In this life, I wanted to do what I truly loved. The smell of disinfectant from the hospital still lingered, and the pain was fresh before me. Was Victoria's mother, my previous life's mother-in-law, asking if I liked her daughter and suggesting that Victoria should marry me. After graduation, the living room was filled with the Li family and friends of my deceased parents. The woman was so kind and gentle. Unlike the harsh and cunning figure I remembered from my previous life, Victoria and I spent little time together, resulting in her never having the chance to get pregnant. Her mother used this to make my life difficult, restricting my diet and forbidding me from eating meat or drinking alcohol, making me drink herbal medicine daily, and even forcing me to pray to gods. That was the least of it. Her daily sarcastic remarks made life unbearable, questioning my manhood and worth. One time, pushed to my limit, I almost hit her. She cried out, lamenting the hardships of raising an orphan like me, claiming that without her, I would have starved to death on the streets. She said she treated me like her own son, and gave her daughter to me, which was a great kindness, and that I was ungrateful. This was my Achilles heel, so I never laid a hand on her returning to the present. She pushed me, asking for my thoughts. If my previous self had been more observant, I would have seen her eagerness to marry me. To Victoria was driven by the desire to divide my wealth. Even later, her urgency for us to have a child was for the same reason. At that time, I was a pampered heir who had just lost both parents and thought I had found family and comfort in the Ali family. How could I have known so much then? But now, after enduring over 30 years of a nominal marriage and the torment of my mother-in-law's unveiled true nature, everything was clear. So I stood up, smiled, and said, "Aunt, you've misunderstood. I only see Victoria as a sister. Besides, after high school, I plan to go to college." Her face turned pale today. She asked me in front of everyone if I liked Victoria to solidify the marriage, making it easier to siphon off my assets without being criticized. She quickly recovered naturally, taking my hand and addressing the guest, saying, "This child is just too introverted. Victoria, accompany Sebastian to the garden. Victoria, in her teenage years, was young, beautiful, and somewhat aloof. She wore a light beige polka-dot dress, the hem reaching her calves, light and natural, with a ribbon of the same color at her waist, highlighting her slender figure. Since her father was a friend of my parents, Victoria and I were childhood companions. Growing up, I liked to be around her. As kids, we got along well, but as we grew older, she became distant in my past life. I didn't understand, thinking it was because of our ages, and I didn't want to admit that Victoria found me annoying. I was a somewhat arrogant young master with a bad temper, and she had to follow her parents' orders to obey me, which she resented but couldn't escape. It made sense she was annoyed if she had just ignored me. It would have been fine, but instead she married me, never let me touch her, and even cheated on me. I hated her. I hated myself more for being blinded by emotions and living such a miserable life. I clenched my fists and slowly relaxed, gently pulling my hand from my mother-in-law's grip, still smiling. My sister doesn't need to accompany me. You have to meet your classmate Ethan soon, right? If you like someone, you should bring them home early, a guest remarked. So, Victoria has someone she likes. Then, why is your mother playing matchmaker? Finally, I looked at Victoria. Her face was paler than her mother's eyes, slightly red at the corners. I couldn't be bothered to look further. Greeted the guests and left on my own. Leaving the living room, I went straight to the front yard mailbox, searching through letters until I found one, addressed to me. Sebastian, Victoria, called from behind. I turned quietly, slipping the letter behind me. She asked, "Why did you say that today?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She replied, "You confessed to me yesterday, but today you say you see me as a sister. Are you playing with me? My mother treats you like her own son, and you embarrassed her in public." I silently looked at her. Remembering the past life after marriage, my mother-in-law publicly humiliated me more than once. Any dissatisfaction from me brought complaints from Victoria. She would say angrily, "Isn't my mom good enough to you? She's an elder, can't." She'd say a few words. So now I gave her the same line back. I smiled. Aunt treats me like her own son, a rebellious son talking back a bit. What's the harm in that? She bit her lip in silence for a moment before saying in confusion, "You're acting very strange, naturally," she thought. So, after all, in my previous life after my parents died, I genuinely considered the LIE family my home. I changed my once arrogant temperament, never daring to retort to my mother-in-law and always trying to please Victoria. I scoffed. "So, what are you angry about? Didn't you hate it when I chased after you?" "Well," I said, "I don't like you." Just as you wished, I turned to leave, wanting to open the letter in my hand, but Victoria said I didn't. I replied, "That's not important." I thought none of it was important. Whether Victoria loved me or not didn't matter. Victoria furrowed her brows and said, "Even being nice doesn't work. Sebastian, you're still so difficult to deal with my parents gone. I had no support." Thus, Victoria's attitude towards me greatly changed. She used to be afraid to speak loudly, but now she openly said I was difficult to get along with. Was I difficult to get along with? I just didn't follow her ideas. Her so-called being nice was just stabilizing me according to her parents' wishes. Hoping to lure me into an engagement in my previous life, after we got engaged, the Life family immediately used the expansion of their business as an excuse to make me hand over most of my assets to pave the way for their growth. At that time, private enterprises were booming, offering numerous opportunities to make a fortune. With my help, the Li family took over the entire city's real estate and food businesses, becoming the richest family in the area. In those 30-odd years of a sham marriage, everyone envied me for marrying into wealth, not knowing that without me, the Live family could never have achieved such heights in this life. I would stand at the top, looking down at the clownish aunt of the Live family, watching their downfall, tired of speaking. I smiled. I am difficult to get along with, so what deal with it? Returning to the house, I quickly opened the letter. I actually had an uncle, my mother's half-brother, who now lived in F country. I had met this uncle once when he came to our home, seeking help for his sick mother. My parents assisted him greatly, even recommending a good hospital. Later, our families occasionally kept in touch, but we lost contact in recent years in my past life. I didn't know my uncle had gone abroad to seek fortune and accidentally struck it rich. He learned about my parents' car accident a year after it happened and found out I was taken in by the Eli family. He wrote letters to contact me, sent to my original home, then forwarded to the Lai family's mailbox. My mother-in-law had always known about the letters, but chose to keep them from me, saying nothing. Many years later, I found out my uncle had been sending me money in letters, but by then it was too late after reading the letter. I learned that my uncle could not return to the country for some reason, so he chose to contact me by mail. This was his 10th letter. The content, similar to the previous ones, introducing his situation abroad and asking if I would like to go to F country. F country was advanced with top-notch education and facilities. The letter included 10 large denomination foreign bills and a plane ticket to F country. My eyes welled up with tears. How wonderful I wasn't an orphan. I had family. The departure location was in a neighboring city. The date, 4 days later, I pulled myself together next. I had to handle my parents' estate. The real estate would remain as it was in prime. Locations likely to appreciate in value, the money would be split. Have to be taken abroad, the other half left in the bank. Moreover, I didn't know my uncle well, so I needed to ensure safety before reaching out to his family. Fortunately, the college entrance exam was over. Using the excuse of visiting friends, I could easily go out and handle things at the bank. I, coincidentally, ran into classmates who invited me to a gathering. The party was at the city's largest karaoke bar, a trendy place at the time when I arrived. Victoria was there too. Her friends teased her. "Why didn't Sebastian come today? Isn't your husband here?" Victoria frowned and complained. "He's so annoying. Besides, I don't like Sebastian. I won't marry him." Laughter erupted among the group. Another friend asked, "Then who do you like?" Our class monitor amidst the commotion. Victoria was pushed towards Ethan. My buddies were a bit embarrassed. Coughing lightly, the flashing lights brought attention to me. I walked up to the group saying, "What a lively gathering, Carrie." On. Victoria instinctively moved closer to Ethan, frowning. "Sebastian, what are you trying to do?" Trying to do. I wanted to expose them both. But now nothing had happened. If I said I had suffered miserably because of these two in my past life, who would believe me? I laughed. "Victoria, if you find me." Annoying. Why did you keep accepting my gifts before? What receiving presents doesn't mean you agree. That's too much without waiting for her response. I clapped my hands. All right, if I'm not welcome, I'll leave before anyone could react. I had already opened the door to leave. Victoria followed quickly. "Sebastian, listen to me behind us." A classmate shouted in surprise. Ethan fainted. Victoria hurriedly left me. "Sebastian, that was just my angry talk. I'll explain to you later." Okay, before she finished, she rushed to Ethan's side. I watched coldly, then turned and walked away, resolutely. There would be no more explanations in 3 days. I would go to F country. From then on, I would cut all ties with them the next day. I cleaned my room, throwing away unnecessary items. My mother-in-law came over, subtly asking which university I had applied to. Naturally, I wouldn't tell her about studying abroad, so I casually mentioned the name of a local UN university. She praised the school while rolling her eyes and brought up Victoria's marriage again, suggesting an engagement that wouldn't interfere with our studies before I could refuse. She assured me. I asked Victoria. "She's just classmates with Ethan. You're overthinking it." I was speechless. She still wouldn't give up. I distanced myself from her, saying, "Aunt, I really have no interest in Victoria." She didn't believe me, hastily promising, "Good boy. I'll make sure Victoria cuts all ties with that classmate Victoria." Overheard this conversation, not understanding the situation. She quickly walked up to me with eyes full of disappointment and resentment. Emotionally, she said, "You have to make everything revolve around you, don't you? Mr. Big Shot, Ethan is weak and comes from a poor family. I took care of him a bit and you had to blow it out of proportion," and complained to my mom as if venting her anger. She yanked the bracelet off her wrist, scattering the beads everywhere. "I was going to give this to you as an apology, but now it seems unnecessary. Let me be clear. Ethan and I have nothing going on, and I won't distance myself from him because of you." After her outburst, she kicked over the trash can I used for discarding things. It clattered to the ground, spilling out various items, including figurines, a scarf she had knitted, and paper cranes, and stars she had folded. Victoria's eyes suddenly reened. "These were gifts for you." I frowned. "Well, I don't like them anymore, so I threw them away." I kicked aside the beads, rolling at my feet. Those annoying things. In 2 days, I would be on a flight to F country. The distance from Wang to Shanghai was considerable, so I needed to leave early. My passport prepared for a previous overseas trip was ready. I didn't have much stuff, valuable items and property. Deeds were kept in a bank safe. Fortunately, Victoria's parents were away on business, so I wouldn't need to say goodbye to them face to face. They had taken care of me for years, but it was only for the inheritance. The money my uncle had sent, which my mother-in-law kept for herself, was enough for my living expenses. Over the years, dragging my suitcase downstairs, I encountered Victoria and Ethan in the living room. They seemed to have just returned. Seeing my suitcase, Victoria asked, "Where are you going? Are you going to tattle on me and Ethan again?" signaling them to get out of my way. I said, "I have no interest in that. I'm going to a friend's house to hang out. Aunt knows about it." I wasn't lying. I had told my mother-in-law I would stay at a friend's house for a couple of days. Victoria, still sulking, coldly said, "Go yourself and come back yourself. Don't let the driver take you. He's our driver, not yours." Indifferently, I nodded. Suddenly, Ethan, who had been silent, spoke up in a humble tone. "Sebastian, I've just been kicked out of my house with nowhere to go. Victoria was kind enough to take me in. I heard from Aunt that you and Victoria have had some misunderstandings because of me. I'm really sorry." Victoria scoffed. No need to apologize to him, clinging to Ethan's arm. She said, "If it weren't for his big mouth, my mom wouldn't have bothered you finding it. Pointless." I walked on behind me. Ethan continued to show weakness, saying, "Victoria, shouldn't you talk to Sebastian?" She replied, "There's no need. He's an orphan with nowhere to go. He'll come back sooner or later." Victoria's tone was determined, laced with coldness and disdain. I paused, then continued forward. They treated me this way because they believed I had nowhere else to go. It didn't matter when we meet again. I'll make sure they know what it feels like to be homeless. On the first day after I left, Victoria didn't feel much. The second day, she anxiously asked the housekeeper, "Hasn't Sebastian come back yet?" The housekeeper shook her head. Victoria's beautiful brows furrowed slightly in annoyance. "I hate it when he acts like this, thinking he's something special. Who does he think he is, still acting like a rich kid after venting?" She asked the housekeeper, "Did Sebastian say which friend's house he went to again?" The housekeeper shook her head. Victoria felt even more irritated, like a stone pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Passing by Sebastian's room, something seemed to flash by the potted plant near the door. She bent down to pick it up, lone bead from the bracelet. Victoria was momentarily dazed, then squatted down inexplicably, searching for more beads. A sense of regret surfaced. How could she have broken the bracelet? It was meant to be a graduation gift for Sebastian, prepared with care. Over a long time she knew Sebastian, living under another's roof, liked to fiddle with things to ease his anxiety. She also knew he had mellowed considerably after his parents' death. So why did she have to be so willful towards him? She thought. When Sebastian came back she would sincerely apologize, but after waiting 1 to 3 days he still didn't return. Her anxiety peaked. She began calling Sebastian's close friends only to hear that no one had seen him. Unconvinced, she searched each friend's home, but found no trace of him until she opened his bedroom door. The once cozy room filled with her cherished childhood gifts was now empty. Sebastian's clothes and shoes were gone, leaving the room much emptier. Frantically searching, she tried to find any sign of his presence but only found a letter under a book on the desk. It read, "I'm leaving. Uncle Aunt, don't worry, just 9 words. Not even a punctuation mark belonged to Victoria when the plane landed." I didn't immediately contact my uncle as instructed. Instead, I hired a detective to investigate my uncle's situation. Nothing in depth. Just a basic understanding of the family's harmony. No family would willingly accept a strange relative if their own life was chaotic. Fortunately, the information was positive. My uncle owned a large farm in a certain state, had a good reputation locally, and his family members got along well. I had prepared for the worst. If my uncle was unreliable, I could still study in F country. It wasn't a big deal after completing the investigation and buying gifts for everyone. I contacted my uncle upon learning I had arrived. He rushed to pick me up 3 days later. I finally arrived at my uncle's farm. Uncle, older than my mother by over 10 years, looked even older due to his early gold prospecting days under the sun. He wasn't good with words, especially around me, simply sighing, "Seeing you reminds me of my sister," and then handing me a card to spend freely. He took me horseback riding and allowed me to play with his large dogs. My A was a slightly plump white woman who made excellent desserts. I must say the desserts were really sweet, almost too sweet, but her enthusiasm was endearing. She constantly made various snacks for me. My uncle's daughter was already married to an American-born Chinese, thanks to whom I could enjoy some Chinese cuisine. My uncle's son, only a year older than me, saw my reserved nature and patted my shoulders, saying, "Brother, you're tall and handsome. Just get a car and the girls will be lining up for you." He then took me to various gatherings and parties, helping me quickly integrate into the local youth scene. After the summer break, it was time for university. Thanks to my uncle's connections, I went to my cousin university and chose a finance major. My past life's experience and my current assets and capital were enough to start. A career, life in F country, was warmer than I had imagined. During holidays, I played and helped with chores on the farm at school. I attended classes and did assignments with classmates from around the world. In my second year, after thorough research, I decided to start with some import-export trade for practice. I discussed my plans with my uncle, who didn't dismiss them, but asked if I had enough money and whether I needed introductions to some business people. Having someone to guide me would definitely help avoid detours. But as a novice, tours weren't a big deal. I was young, had time, and the money to cover mistakes. So I and 3 classmates from my class invested in a small company exporting clothes and food from F country to neighboring countries. After a year, in my 3rd year, the company made a small profit, but my classmates had different thoughts. Some wanted to start their own businesses, while others felt the company's profits were unstable and left. Thus, the company was dissolved. Starting the company gave me a lot of experience. If I were the source factory for the products, I'd earn more. I planned and researched again, preparing to start another company before graduation. In my spare time, I bought a car for my uncle and an apartment near the university for myself, where I lived with my cousin in our apartment. We adopted many stray cats, both disabled and healthy. When the sun shone on the balcony, these furry ones would curl up in a heap sleeping at my feet, as I petted one and played with another. I recalled my past life on our first wedding anniversary. Victoria and I both liked cats, and she had mentioned wanting to raise one when we got married. So I bought a Siamese kitten hoping to surprise her. However, her parents disapproved, saying our priority should be for Victoria to prepare for pregnancy, and the cat would affect that. The kit didn't understand what it had done wrong. Looking pitiful in my arms, I had to entrust it to a cat-loving friend, giving money and supplies and visiting it regularly. Thinking of this, I held a long-haired orange cat. It seemed I hadn't thought of my past life for Victoria's family in a long time. After all, I was quite happy. Now, no need to remember unpleasant things. In the second semester of my third year, I established a new company for dairy products, from raising cows to processing dairy products, gradually perfecting the industrial chain. Finally, in my graduation year, the entire production chain was complete. This allowed me to significantly reduce costs, giving me the leverage to negotiate prices for both domestic and export businesses, once everything stabilized. I suggested returning to my home country to visit. Uncle didn't object. My cousin accompanied me as soon as we landed. Someone covered my eyes. Sebastian, guess who? I knew the voice. It was my business partner, the Spanish Beauty, and the only partner who had been with me since university. Surprise, she asked. Weren't you supposed to handle the land deal? Who's taking care of it, if you're here? I replied. Her bright eyes sparkled. In your heart, the company's more important than me. Right, of course. Stop pretending to be pitiful, I said. My cousin laughed. She's as pretty as your secretary. He then gave Anna a thumbs up, encouraging her. Anna, pleased, handed over the breakfast she'd prepared. But before she could give it to me, another tall figure stepped in, handing me a lunchbox. She had delicate hands and fair skin, thoughtfully taking out a wet wipe from her bag for me. Softly, she said, "The car is ready, boss." Vivian's sweet voice and cold demeanor were noticeable. Her exquisite features caught my eye. She looked at me, blocking and seemingly unaware of her presence. This secretary was getting more jealous by the day. I silently got into the car. The changes in the country were significant. I first went to pay respects at my parents' graves. When I arrived, a bunch of wilted white chrysanthemum swayed in the wind. Probably friends of my parents had visited. I removed the old flowers, placing my own bouquet, and told my parents about life abroad, how my uncle took care of me, my aunt's excellent cooking, except the desserts, and my sister and brother-in-law's mishaps with their newborn. As for myself, everything was fine. I had family to rely on, graduated as an outstanding student, and met many like-minded friends in business. Don't worry, I've been taking good care of myself. It started to rain, the drops salty as they slipped into my mouth after the visit. We left the cemetery. My cousin held an umbrella for Anna, while Vivian walked beside me. We passed by a man and a woman, the woman holding a bouquet of white crooms, followed by the man with an umbrella. Spoke words that stung. You won't find Sebastian, no matter how often you come and you're carrying our child. Can't you consider my feelings? The familiar yet unfamiliar voice made me instinctively turn to look. Who else could it be? But Ethan and Victoria, hearing my name, my cousin and Anna, looked at me. I shook my head, signaling them to ignore it. Ethan kept talking, and Victoria suddenly stopped, turning around and snatching his umbrella, throwing it away. Can't you let me be? You're so annoying, she said. Ethan, furious, stomped on the fallen umbrella, seeing they were about to start a big argument in my parents' graves. I had the cemetery staff handle it. As for why I didn't reveal myself to Victoria, it's because I didn't return for her. I was interested in the current real estate market and didn't want any bad luck affecting my business. Coincidentally, while visiting my old house, I ran into an elder. He was friends with my parents and the Li family, so he quickly informed my mother-in-law of my return. She was excited and asked me to wait for her, saying, "Sebastian, why didn't you tell Auntie you were back? I've been so worried. Let me come and get you." I replied, "No, Auntie, I have things to do," and hung up. Returning the phone to the elder by the time Victoria and her mother arrived, we had already left for a hotel in the city to attend a banquet with several developers from Wang to discuss business. The banquet was grand, and we, accustomed to socializing in F country, felt at ease during the event. I had pleasant conversations with several business people, thanks in part to my genuine insights on business, and partly due to my parents' connections. The business talks went smoothly. Halfway through the banquet, there was a commotion at the entrance. The host, Mr. Zhang, displeased, asked what was happening. The staff said that Miss Li didn't have an invitation and insisted on coming in. Mr. Zhang glanced at me, knowing I had once been taken in by the Li family, smiled and said, "There was a mistake with the invitations. Please let Miss Li in." I remained expressionless, but found it amusing. Forgetting the invitation was just an excuse without my financial support. The Li family's small company couldn't survive changes in policies, almost drove it to bankruptcy. Who would want to associate with a Li family? Now, I didn't stop Mr. Zhang from letting them in. Outsiders didn't know about my grievances with the Li family. If word got out, people might call me ungrateful. It was best to keep up appearances. Victoria's eyes locked onto me instantly. Wearing a slightly worn designer dress wrinkled from the scuffle, she ignored it and walked briskly towards me. "Sebastian, you're finally back," she said, her eyes filled with a desperate brightness. I didn't move just as Victoria was about to reach me. 3 people stood in her way. My cousin frowned. "Who are you?" Anna, hands on her hips, added another one. Vivian, sipping water, cleared her throat, ready to scold. I was speechless. We were legitimate business people after all. Victoria's eyes reamed. "Sebastian." Why she asked, I had no intention of reminiscing. Long time. "No, see, I have things to do," Karana replied behind Victoria. Her mother pushed through tears. In her eyes. "Sebastian, why did you leave without a word? Where have you been all these years?" She grabbed my hand, starting to cry, expressionless. I pulled my hand away. "Auntie, you received my uncle's letters? Why didn't you tell me I left a note when I left?" Everyone present understanding, people realized what had happened. It was clear my mother-in-law had hidden my uncle's letters to keep me from finding family, not out of love, but for my assets. No need to spell it out, they got it. My mother-in-law stopped crying, forcing a smile. "Sebastian, don't be angry. How was I to know they weren't scams, by the way? Victoria looked for you for a long time. You two should catch up." She pulled Victoria to my side. Victoria, silent, stared at me with teary eyes, making me uncomfortable. I frowned, and Vivian stepped in. "Please keep your distance from my husband." Anna scoffed. "If I couldn't win him over, you should give up ignoring them." Victoria looked at me. "Why did you leave? Do you know how long I've been looking for you?" Shaking my head, I replied, "I don't know. Don't care and don't want to know." Victoria choked, pulling a repaired bracelet from her pocket. "I fixed this. I was looking for you to make up, Sebastian. I'll never be foolish again." Her earnestness, her eyes glistening with tears, made Anna laugh. "Sister, are you a high schooler? What's this so cheap and childish?" Victoria's eyes deepened with sadness. "I'll do anything. Just don't ignore me, please. Gifts' value never mattered to me. I didn't care if I liked them or not. Back then, I was happy because I liked the person giving them. Now I didn't even want to waste hatred on Victoria. She was too weak, not worth being my opponent, especially without the emotions clouding my judgment from a past life. I appreciated your arrogance and how you thought you had me under control. It was amusing." I said. She choked. "Sebastian." Those were just angry words, she hurriedly explained. I thought I waved my hand dismissively. "It doesn't matter." Taking a glass of champagne from a waiter, I said indifferently, "Does your husband know you're here to see me? Don't waste my time. I have business to attend to." Victoria's lips trembled as if she had been dealt a heavy blow in my past life. If I wanted to talk to her, she would always say she was busy doing her hair shopping, baking. In reality, she was spending her nights with Ethan, happily raising a family. Seeing me about to leave, Victoria panicked. "Please don't go. Can we start over?" Before I could respond, my cousin spoke up. "Who's this woman trying to seduce my brother?" Victoria's face turned pale. She stammered, "I didn't mean to hide my marriage, Sebastian. I just wanted to win you back. Don't be angry, Ethan drugged me. That's why I made a mistake. I've been faithful to you all these years." "Wait, don't insult the term faithful. What do I have to be angry about?" I replied in the end. Mr. Zhang had Victoria and her mother escorted out after the banquet. Victoria waited to see me, but Ethan arrived, beating her up. He yelled, "You're carrying my child and still seeing other men," or how shameless pregnant women are prone to mood swings, and Victoria lost her temper telling him to get lost. They ended up fighting, and Ethan in his rage punched her. Hard. Blood flowed down her legs. I looked away and got into the car. Despite the bleeding, Victoria wailed my name from afar. My cousin remarked, "She's really devoted, isn't she?" "What a scumbag," I corrected him. "Not devoted, she's trying to use our past to get me to help the LIE family. She only loves herself. The business negotiations went well. I would be invest ING with Mr. Zhang and others in the largest new mall in Wong. Due to the preparatory work, I had to stay in the country for a while. Anna returned to F country first, nagging me before she left. There's an old saying, a good horse doesn't turn back to grace. Don't reconcile with that woman. And your secretary isn't any better. She's a green TBT Vivian," quietly said. "Boss, I can also speak in a mature voice." I rolled my eyes as at them. "I'm only interested in making money. If you hinder that, you're both fired." Anna glared at Vivian and boarded the plane angrily. Vivian subtly adjusted her neckline, trying to make her cleavage more noticeable. I was speechless after her miscarriage. Victoria sought me out a few times, but eventually gave up. The Ethan family felt humiliated by her infidelity and demanded an explanation from the LIE family. The LIE family is already poor business performance worsened, leading to bankruptcy. They hired top lawyers to help Ethan divorce Victoria, and he took most of the LIE family's remaining assets. Mr. Lee hanged himself at the company's old site due to the bankruptcy. Mrs. Lee, mentally unstable from the shock, talked to imaginary people saying, "She's your wife. Isn't it natural to spend money on her? Victoria married an orphan, isn't it? Right for him to pay later." She caused a scene in the street, was hit by a car, ending up paralyzed. Victoria begged Ethan for money to treat her mother, but most of his money went to his relatives and he refused to help. They argued, and Victoria blamed all her misfortunes on Ethan. He didn't tolerate her and beat her severely. No one knew Victoria had brought a knife in. The next moment, she stabbed Ethan, killing him. She was quickly arrested. I kindly visited Mrs. Lee in the hospital, paying her medical bills. People praised my loyalty, not knowing I hired the worst caregivers for her. She soon developed bed sores and Red, standing by her side. I smiled. "Auntie, do you remember your past life? Did you ever think you'd end up in my hands while tormenting me? You knew Victoria had someone else, but still manipulated me, saying I was worthless while I starved, took medicine, and bowed to gods your family enjoyed life. Now you can taste my pain." Mrs. Lee's eyes widened in anger, her hands flailing, unable to touch my sleeve, drooling her eyes full of resentment. I wouldn't let her die, just let her live in misery before her execution. Victoria requested to see me. I agreed, facing me. She cried and repented, saying memories, not her own, flooded her mind. She saw her coldness in her past life, leading to my lonely existence. "Can you forgive me? I love you. I didn't face my feelings because I wanted to break free from my parents' control. I always obeyed them. But when they told me to love you, I rebelled. How childish now. I've lost everything, she sobbed. I shook my head. She laughed bitterly. I hate me. My miserable life is my retribution. I couldn't help but laugh. Retribution, there's no such thing as convenient retribution. My reflection in the glass showed my excited expression. You think your company's downfall was due to the environment. You think Ethan found the banquet location by chance. You think your miscarriage was easy. You think those poor relatives easily found top lawyers. Victoria's face turned pale, her eyes blood red. He asked, "Do you hate me that much? Why wouldn't I?" I replied, in my past life, I did nothing wrong. Yet I lived a miserable existence because the Lay family coveted my wealth and ruined my life in this life. I only made a few small moves, which was already very merciful. The choices were all made by the Lee family themselves. I stood up, leaving Victoria with one final sentence. I'll bring the news of your execution to your mother, leaving the prison. I got into the black car, driving through the rain-soaked, newly developed commercial district. The towering buildings were taking shape, heralding the arrival of my future.